Okay, I think we're basically recording the meeting, and we have a backup going on. I should have enough RAM to and space to store that. So I think with that, I'm gonna pass it on to you, Brandon, and let us tell you or tell us what we're gonna be talking about.
All right. Thanks, Selvin. So, for those of you that don't know us, I'm Brandon. This is Leslie, and back here is Brad from Pixel Tonic. And the reason we're here is obviously because we made a bit of a splash yesterday um, with some of the initial policies we're planning on for the plugin store. And oh, I'm sorry, and also Luke is here. He's on chat. So definitely lots of strong opinions, some uneasiness. We were kind of expecting that. We've actually kind of done a test run of these announcements last week, and just kind of took the temperature of a small sampling of the community, and that kind of demonstrated that there's definitely different opinions here. And knowing that, we thought it's probably a good idea to get this info out in the open earlier than later. Possibly partly to invite community feedback in, and also partly just to kind of send the signal of what's to come, and hopefully be able to I don't know, get people to get on board with it if possible, before it actually launches. So yeah, I mean, there's a lot of stuff on GitHub, and there's a lot of stuff going on in Slack. I've got a few different particular points that seem strongly made and articulated on Slack. And if no one has anything else they want to add, I mean, I guess we could just start kind of going through these and kind of talk about each one and see what we think. We're not going to have a great answer for every single one of these. We haven't thought through every possible scenario, but we have, obviously put quite a bit of thought into these decisions. We didn't just pull them out of thin air. So with that said, Andre Elvin was definitely one of the prominent people that seemed kind of opposed to the idea, at least parts of it, as far as subscription pricing goes, and kind of locking everyone into subscription pricing. And I felt like kind of the first major point that he made was he said, I believe it will slow the growth and make the ecosystem stagnate. Leslie, do you want to say anything to that point?
I disagree.
I guess where we're coming from is we've seen, so I mean, part of it is there's maybe this fear that the introduction of the store is going to massively transform the ecosystem and turn it all very commercial, which I personally don't expect that to be the case. I think there's definitely going to be more of an encouragement. I know that there are some people that have made their plugins free for now in anticipation of the store and just basically waiting for the store before they start charging. But I think there's still going to be a very healthy amount of open source stuff going on. I mean, we ourselves have maybe 20 plugins, 19 of which are MIT licensed, and will continue to be. They're, and kind of only actually putting a price tag on things where it really, really warrants it, in our opinion. So that's basically commerce right now.
Yeah, I mean, with Elvin's comments, what he posted on GitHub and also on the Slack chat, I mean, they're all good points. So I don't want to be disrespectful of his opinion at all. But I think what we're going for that's different is that in the open source world, it's very, very difficult to find out what's real and what's not. And one of the things that we really want to encourage is setting what does a revenue model look like so that people can charge for their work or they can offer it free. So people already know how to offer their stuff for free. And we definitely want to continue that. But when it comes for charging for work, we already know the one-off pricing model doesn't work. And there's many places we could start with that argument. Man, I've been in this business for a long time now, and I've seen all sides of it. And one-off pricing just doesn't work. It's not sustainable. And one of the points that was made by Elvin and a couple other people is, well, we have to wait till Craft's market to get bigger. And our feeling is the opposite. We have to do it before Craft gets bigger. It's much harder to make the switch if you're already locked into a revenue model that's bad for everyone, because then ironically, it's harder to make the switch if you're halfway successful, but not all the way. So it's easier to take the pain and the learning curve up front than after you're big. The other point is that WordPress is the dominant player. They own 25% of the market. So the idea that one-off plugins would be sustainable if Craft's market were quote, just big enough, the response I have is that that's not what the research shows. WordPress plugins don't work that way. WordPress themes don't work that way. There is no major plugin store in the CMS world or software in general that we're aware of that has a quality set of plugins that run off one-off pricing.
What about the idea that by introducing subscription pricing, we're going to stunt the growth of Craft and plugins themselves, which I think might be more of where I don't. It's hard to know without him here, but it seems like that was kind of more of the direction he was taking it. Like by doing this at this point in time, we're kind of putting a cap on how much Craft can grow. I guess like we both come from the baggage of the EE community, and seeing a scenario where subscription was not introduced, and seeing how unsustainable that was, watching plugin developers left and right just not staying on top of updates, not staying, not answering support, just losing interest and throwing in the towel. And so I guess like we've already seen what happens through like normal pricing, through non-subscription pricing.
Yeah.
And we obviously want to avoid that if we can, because that's the ultimate limiter to how much the CMS can grow is if like early on in Craft's lifespan, it becomes clear that plugin development just isn't sustainable. And that using these plugins is a crapshoot, and if you need to start using plugins, then there's a 50-50 chance or whatever it is that when the next major update of Craft comes out, the plugin developer won't even be around anymore. So,
and I also think it's important how you want to grow, how we specifically want to grow as well. If we want to have one-off pricing that encourages a free-for-all, it's very difficult for us as the vendor to have sustainable revenue off that. And the reason that is, like the popular plugins out there, they all come back to us at some point. At some point, we're tier 1 support for every single plugin out there, whether we want to be or not. So if they can't get a hold of a developer or it was just posted on GitHub, that all comes back to us. And so there is a real built-in cost for doing that. So if we don't have like a really straightforward, simple way to address at least part of that, then we dig ourselves in a hole too. And that's part of the reason that it's important that we start looking at solutions while we're still in front of the problem. Because those support costs right now are annoying, but they're not painful. They don't deter development on Craft. But 2 years from now, that won't be the case. Like if we don't get ahead of this, all those things will start to happen. if we don't have an ecosystem that supports us and you guys, and most importantly, the clients. And I think that goes, like there were questions about how do we sell this to clients, and I think those are all very legitimate questions, and that's something we definitely want to help with and get good feedback on. So if you have any of those particular questions, the most helpful thing to us are what type of clients are we talking about? So it'd be great to know, like, are these clients that are paying you $5,000 for a build, $500? Are they clients who have paid you $30,000? Are these clients that have paid you $300,000? Because when someone says it doesn't work for me, it's really helpful to get specifics about what that means so that we have better things to act on and figure out in there. Because we see, craft builds that are $5,000, and I got off the phone with someone who's working on a $400,000 build. So the spectrum is very, very wide. The people at $400,000 are laughing at all of us right now in terms of subscriptions, and the nonprofits, charities, and small bills, small budgets have very legitimate concerns that deserve to be listened to just as well. So it's helpful to get definition on that kind of thing.
Brandon, can you just, there's a lot of people asking in the chat about craft becoming a subscription now, and that I suspect that there's a lot of misinformation. They're hearing bits and pieces. They just read a little bit online. You need to kind of go over it just from a higher level again for people that.
Yeah.
Sure. I mean, so like we haven't been very clear on craft pricing because we aren't decided yet on craft pricing. There's different goals we have down the road for craft that are influencing that decision. There's the fact that like we are much more dependent on craft and the current business model than any plugin developer is on their plugin right now. That's not to make light of plugin development business, but like we are literally running a 7-person company right now primarily on craft licenses, and so we need to be much more cautious about changing that in a way that doesn't totally screw us over and put us out of business. And so we're throwing around different options. Definitely all the cases we've made as far as like why we think subscription makes sense for plugins applies just as much to craft, sometimes more so. It's the if a plugin stops updating itself, if a plugin developer stops updating their plugin and people switch away from it or whatever, that's fine because another plugin pops up. If we were to stop developing craft, the entire ecosystem goes away. So like that support burden and maintenance burden is much higher on us than any one plugin. But at the same time, we really don't want to put ourselves out of business. We want to make sure that we're doing things level-headed and but at the same time, and setting a signal for plug. Yeah, anyways, there's conflicting thoughts. We just don't know yet. So no comment specifically beyond like we're still debating it.
I think it's okay to give them like the context of the discussion when we think about subscription.
Sure.
The context is when we are selling craft to agencies and freelancers, it's already subscription. It's like a pseudo SaaS model. So you continue to build one-off sites. You are our primary customer. And it works great. When we're giving support to you, it works great. The challenge for us then is, like I see some specifics happening in there, like $30,000 is enough to do real stuff with. So a $30,000 build, you do that for a client, and so long as you are the direct line of support for the client, it's wonderful. It's easy to support you. We love it. But when the client does something dumb like fire you or leaves you or switches away, they come back to us, and then we have to figure out what you did with that $30,000 inside your craft install. And at that point, we've only ever received $300. So there needs to be something in there, whether that's subscription, paid support, something where we're receiving that end of support, that we have to find a product to address that with. And again, it's something that is a minor thing right now, but as craft gets more and more popular, if we don't have an answer to that, then we will get in trouble. So that's kind of the crux of it. Will subscription alleviate that? Should there be separate tech support? Like, there's a bunch of different stuff under consideration for that. Some of it that we're already testing privately.
Is there anything else that's popping up in chat? We haven't really been able to pay attention.
Maybe I'll play devil's advocate here and talk about some things that might be useful to get clarification on. And I think a big part of the confusion and the mixed sort of almost emotions since you announced this is like the fear of the unknown, right? Because
Sure.
when you proposed that we make our source code open source and that every plugin should be made publicly available. Well, it makes sense because in reality, we're not writing C code that gets compiled and you're only delivering the compiled version, right? So in theory, it makes sense, but it's not something that we're used to, or at least I wasn't used to. So it kind of took me back a little bit and it made me uneasy. So
Sure.
Since then, I've embraced the idea, and I mean, for one, I didn't even have commercial plugins. Like, my plugins are open source, but it made me uneasy. And I think now you're kind of with the idea of subscriptions, you're kind of introducing new things as well. That for us, kind of, I think some of us were taken by surprise, and we're still uneasy about the fact that the biggest selling point is sustainability in what we're doing, right? And I think that money is probably the only sustainable or consistent incentive in terms of us building things, providing support, and iterating through our software, rather than getting excited about an idea to build a plugin, to create it, and then just leave it there. So I think sustainability is important. And the other thing that I believe is kind of one of those things where, okay, we're trying to advocate and trying to plan for sustainability, but really to Andrew or to Andres or whatever his name is, the fact that the market is so small right now is one of those things. Is like, what do we want to build sustainability, or what is the problem of sustainability if we know that the biggest thing right now is the market, the size of the market compared to, say, WordPress or Expression Engine or whatever. So I think, like, to me, I'm uncomfortable than I am against the idea and what you're presenting, because I know how much effort it takes to have a commercial plugin and to maintain it. Like, the one-time solution may not be the right solution, and it isn't for a lot of people. And that's why plugins become abandonware, or people just don't have the capacity to support them. And when they need to take a long vacation or they get sick, there isn't enough revenue there to hire somebody else to watch over the project while they're gone. So sustainability is obviously the big sort of benefit here, but you are kind of asking us to be okay with a lot of things. I think one of them is we got to be open to put our source code out there. And again, you said you're just, what's that?
I was just gonna say, I mean, I totally understand. A big part of the reason we are bringing this up now instead of 6 months from now or whenever everything launches is because we know it's a lot to stomach. Sure. And we want to give you that processing time, and we also want to make it a two-way conversation. And this is all healthy. This is all good. One thing to reiterate is, if you just don't like it, you don't have to be on the plugin store.
Sure.
Craft has nothing built in that forces you to be part of the plugin store. And there's ways to install plugins that don't come from a public GitHub or Bitbucket repo. So there's, this basically, we've put a ton of time into researching, successful and sustainable software models, especially looking at the WordPress ecosystem, because there's been the most opportunity for exploration in that ecosystem, considering how big it is and how many developers are in the mix with varying opinions. And it seems like, from everything we've seen, like that what we're proposing here is what has surfaced as like the most common sustainable model, which we feel is a good starting point. Is to kind of pick what seems like the best from the WordPress model or the WordPress ecosystem and start with that. It's not to say we can't adapt that over time or improve it based on needs or add different features and things like that. But we also considering that like what we feel is most likely the best model to go with is so different from what is the norm right now.
Sure.
We feel like it's like the best starting point is to make a very strong signal and a very strong push toward that one model. And again, to just, if you want to play ball with us, then that's the choice you're kind of locked into. Because if we did give you a choice, if we did say, you know what, you can choose as a developer whether you want to offer subscription or have one-time pricing, because it's so different, everyone is going to default to what they're used to.
Sure.
So it's just because of that discomfort that you mentioned. And that could very well be, against their own interests in the long run, and they would never know. You just, because you're not taking the chance on trying something new. So if we force you to try something new, even in the back of our mind, thinking like, if this doesn't work out 6 months from now, we can introduce like a different pricing option or something like that. At least we've made that. At least we've given everyone that time to try it out without any choices. At least if they want to play ball in the plugin store. And that's really the only way we're going to be able to push this community forward as far as we're concerned.
And there's also the real constraints of what do we launch with, and what's the foundation, and then where do we go from there.
Yeah.
So I think just to kind of follow that up, the biggest thing here as a big open source proponent or someone that loves open source, and I think that the having a sustainable model for commercial plugins I don't think it should be used as kind of distance yourself from supporting open source products, or at least supporting open source developers. Like I think that in discussions I've had with other people since you announced this stuff, some of the things that have come up is, okay, I love open source and I take pride in open source. The stuff that I build can compete with any commercial plugin. So I would say, this doesn't go against anything that you're trying to do, because what you're proposing, it doesn't really hinder us, right?
No.
So, but at the same time, it's going to be really beneficial for the commercial plugin developers.
Again, like, and this is something that's I guess been a little confusing. That we're definitely allowing free open source if you want plugins in the store. There's no, if that's what you want to do, then use the plugin store as a directory for your plugin, and that's it. The store part is just a word. And we're with you. We love open source. I mean, I mentioned earlier, 19 of 20 or 20 plugins, or however many it is, like all but commerce, they're all released with an MIT license, and we all contribute to open source. We contribute to Yi quite a bit and other things. We definitely are open source believers, and like I mentioned this earlier, that like there's long-term pricing considerations to make with Craft that kind of are influencing Craft's pricing. Not to totally derail this conversation, but like one of the things we're considering is like it'd be really interesting if a few years from now we've built up enough like peripheral businesses around Craft that we could actually turn Craft into an open source product and completely bolster up the entire ecosystem at that point. Not saying it's going to happen, but it's we love open source, and that's a direction we could consider taking.
I think I think that's good to hear. I think anybody that may want to ask specific questions, or if someone can help me monitor the chat. One of the things that I think I'd like to get more information on, or at least kind of get your thinking behind it, because having been around the community long enough, I understand that a lot of the things that you guys do is based on actual research and team discussions and talking to other people. So I can generally take the news with a grain of salt, and at least kind of let it sit for a little bit. But one of the things that I think I've seen a lot in the comments that follow your announcement or other things is really developers that are not agencies oftentimes have to be salesmen, right? Like we have to sell people on building something. So while a sustainable model for commercial plugins is a huge goal, or at least part of the goal that you're trying to accomplish with this new pricing structure and the launch of the plugin store, you basically have Craft and the plugin developers as a beneficiary, and as a long-term beneficiary of this change would be the end client, right? Whoever gets a project built on Craft with commercial plugins, etc. But the thing is that we get the immediate satisfaction that we're going to be selling our plugins and we're going to be getting paid for it and paid over time. It's benefit for us that's clear to explain and clear to interpret. Whereas a client, and I think that this is where I'd like to kind of get your input on, like what kind of clients should we be targeting? Because obviously as developers, we want to work with clients that are in the $10,000 bracket. But realistically speaking, a market that's going to have a big enough impact or a big enough slice in the market will have to have kind of a mix of agencies that are kind of buying, license, building a lot of sites, and kind of like mid-level developer. It might be partnerships working with $10,000 projects, and then a good chunk of developers, working on 2,500 to 5K projects. So what is your thinking process behind, or how do you think we should approach dealing or selling Craft to clients? Is it something that we need to take into our own budgeting and proposal? Is it something that have you thought about how you as a developer working, not necessarily selling plugins, but consuming those plugins to execute in a project? What would be something for us to educate ourselves on? How do we sell? How do we sell people on? Okay, listen, it's gonna be $5,000 initially, and then
this morning I had a talk with a Craft developer who almost lost his client because he had bought a couple commercial plugins, one-time fees.
Sure.
And they weren't doing quite what he hoped they would do, and he was having a hard time getting support for them. And this is not a unique problem to Craft. The concept that every plugin developer is just a person. They've got their own lives, their own businesses to run. But man, that conversation is the real one you want to avoid when you've sold your client on this Craft project and things just aren't quite working out, and part of it is due to bad expectations, unrealistic expectations set by the plugin developer, or you putting too much weight in the fact that you put $50 or $100 into a plugin one time, and that especially becomes an issue, a couple of years from now if you haven't paid another dime, there haven't been any major updates, no reason to pay them for anything else. From the plugin developer standpoint, there's very little incentive to help you if that's the sort of relationship you guys have established. So not to get all fire and brimstone on you, but while it might be uncomfortable to start having this conversation, like, selling the website not as a piece of art that you buy once and you're done with, but as a living and breathing thing. Even if your side of the development is done, realizing, website. I think Andrew Welsh said something like websites are a service or something like that.
They are a recurring service, whether you want it to be or not.
Yeah, I mean, you're going to have hosting fees that recur. You're going to have analytics fees. You're going to have all these different fees that already recur, and the software absolutely needs to continually be updated, whether it's feature complete or not. Because Craft gets updated, because browsers get updated. I mean, because security vulnerabilities are reported. Like it's not a flat static thing where you just deliver it and it's done. And I think having for plugins that want to charge, setting the expectation that this is something that is going to be both for the plugin developer to have a pricing scheme that kind of puts them into a commitment position to continue maintaining it and updating it as the entire environment changes over time. And also, setting the customer's expectation. They're buying something that that the plugin developer is not done with. It will never be done with, and so they should be able to continue to support that development as long as they're benefiting from the plugin. I think that's a really good thing, and I think that's it might be a little uncomfortable just because you haven't had that conversation before, but it's really not a big extension from the current setting expectations that you have to pay for hosting on a recurring basis. And the other nice thing is it kind of opens the door for talking about retainers. If that's not something you're doing already, realize that everything needs maintenance. Even the most static basic site is going to need updates applied to it. It's going to need to be updated as browsers change, just like plugins need to worry about browsers. And frankly, the client's always going to have random things that they would like to be done, and having that built into the conversation, let's, project's done now, let's talk retainer and let's talk recurring fees for this thing. It's not a bad conversation to have, even if you're new to it and it's awkward at first, and it's a hell of a lot less awkward than coming back to them a year from now and telling them, hey, I'm sorry, we've got to pay all this money now because everything's changed and your site's getting hacked and blah blah blah. I mean, that's not an unrealistic scenario. It happens much more common than we'd like to think. So,
can I chime in? Is it okay if I chime in?
Yeah.
On that. So, well, first of all, if and when there's ever a craft conference, I think I know my topic will be it'd be just a business model and how to understand recurring stuff, because exactly what you're bringing up, and I think that's the fear for some of us, is a sense of how we're pricing projects, because that's part of the conversation that's even in the chat right now, is what about these lower priced projects that we don't want to lose, and we put it on Craft and these recurring things. So part of it is definitely mindset of how we view what we're doing, how we view what we're offering. And so you're not only just changing Craft, but you're changing how we have to then operate around Craft as long as we're working it. And so it changes our model. So there's a huge agency that we work with, and I also sent them the link right away. I was like, hey, just so y'all know this is happening. And the first response back was, well, it's going to change our pricing model, And so it's true for everyone, and they're an Inc. 5000 company. So I think all of us are going to face that, and we have to figure out how we're going to deal with this. But I think some of the questions that I saw that I thought were appropriate were the sense of paid support, and I think Leslie, you and I have kind of even talked about that a little bit, but what's the direction of offering paid support versus Craft subscriptions, or how does that play into? Is it kind of a both and, or are you kind of navigating between both worlds of we'll pick one?
So first of all, I'm glad you brought this up, because this was one of the things that I was hoping to get around to. So go ahead.
Before we get too far away from it, you asked, I've seen in chat, and you asked directly as well, should you invest in learning how to sell Craft? Are we going to help with that? And the answer is yes on both counts. So I'm not very public with what I do at Pixel Tonic. But the essence of my job is that I am on the phone for at least 75% of my time, helping freelancers to large agencies sell Craft every single day. So in our update that we posted at the beginning of the year, we kind of listed out the number of calls I've been on. And I, as these guys can attest to, I'm on the phone almost all the time. We're starting to work with a marketing person because the internal decision that we've made is that we can't think of the people on, like especially the people on this call, we can't think of you as our customer. It's more important to think of you as our team and our sales force. And you're also our customer in a pragmatic sense now, but we have to invest in helping you sell craft. So if we're, no matter what we do, we have to get you more materials, we have to have more availability, we have to make the case for craft. And I've spent most of the last year and a half coming up with what we think are good ways to do that we've tested privately. So the big thing is what actually makes craft different to your clients? What's the value out there? So no matter what we do, we're not as big as WordPress. So on the small projects especially, everyone says, well, why is craft different from WordPress? And so there's one of the things that's different about us is that on a whole, we are a better professional community. I mean, there are some awesome WordPress devs, but WordPress as a product is not made for you. It's made for a prosumer that wants to blog and that has its roots and it shows. And so especially when you pass the WordPress farms where they're charging between $3,000 and $5,000 to ship weekly. Like there's a local shop here in Bend that was interested in using Craft to replace WordPress, and they're like shipping out 5 or 6 WordPress sites a month at $2,000 a piece, and Craft is horrible for that, at least in the way that they do it. Part of the job is to figure out what is Craft for, and it's really for when you need a custom solution and you actually need a professional to make it for you. And that's regardless of budget. So you put those things together, and that's where Craft's sweet spot hits. So we have described it internally as where WordPress and Shopify end, but way before Magento and Sitecore begin. And so the problem for us is that that's a really, really huge space out there. And so to just say Craft is for that encompasses everyone here and the end clients, but we have to get a lot more specific. So the question then becomes, we have to help make that case. And one of the things it comes down to is the relationship between you and Pixel and Tonic matters to the client, and that's often why they will go with Craft over WordPress, is because they know that we will respond as a company and address your needs. Like take security issues, for example. If you actually want someone at Automatic and your client wants them to respond to a security issue, that's a minimum of $75,000 per year per seat to get a response from the makers of WordPress. To get a response from Drupal Acquia, it's more. It's $100,000 a year. Anyone else, you're working with a third party. So a strong sales pitch on like the $30,000 projects is exactly that. We know Pixel and Tonic, we're in such and such a program, and it's really straightforward for you to participate in that. And what you tell the client is that we care, we work with you, here's how it is. And if there's any sort of issue, here's our phone number, here's the support, and we'll back you guys 100% in that. And that's a message that with Craft 3 Forward, as we get more of the marketing materials out, is going to be loud and clear, is that we're backing small developers, small freelancers, boutique shops. Basically, if you're an agency of 50 people or less, you are our core audience, and so are your clients. And so the thing that we can do that the big open source systems can't do is to say, we back you. And we're there for you. We're here with support. We're here with security fixes. It's not $100,000 a year to get to us. So like I was talking with Matt Weinberg about Sitecore's pricing. They use Craft on projects where their competition is $85,000 per year per seat. And then on the low end on nonprofit stuff, it's all like, Blackbot and the dark, sullied world in there. And so we want to be able to have a solution that says yes to the small projects and the mid-sized projects and no to enterprise. That's a different key. So that goes back to, should it be support or should it be subscription? The main considerations there are, if you are selling support contracts and we're trying to move our revenue model to have a substantial that be support contracts, those support contracts to be sustainable tend to be for higher end clients, meaning enterprise clients or large size businesses. So you see this in the Drupal community a lot. Acquia came in and they took on a bunch of funding and they went up to enterprise clients. And at first it was really good for the Drupal community. But now if you look into the Drupal community, what you see is that the product is now being aimed and coded for IT managers at places like Procter and Gamble to go head to head with Sitecore. Very few of you on a regular basis want anything to do with that world, and we don't, like, to put it mildly. So then the question becomes, should we have $50,000 a year subscription programs? And at that price level, we're actually half the price of our biggest competitors. It's useless to all of you. And if we make our living that way, the product will also gravitate towards that clientele, regardless of what we say, because the product gets developed to where the revenue comes in. So the pro argument for subscription on our end in some form is that if we want to continue making money in a way that serves your clients and you directly, that model has to match the majority of how we make our revenue so that we can continue to make craft for you specifically. So when it comes to support, subscription, a combination of there, I saw like 1 and 2 tier solutions in there. Like eventually that's probably the right answer. So a lot of this is just like, where do we start?
So to summarize, so first of all, like, and just to kind of reiterate, like what was going on in Slack, I think the conversation started with Andre's message. He said, everyone seems to be developing plugins either because they think it's fun or because they need the functionality at some point. The painful and time-consuming part is support. So why not build the business model around that? And that kind of spurred this conversation of like, well, yeah, so why don't plugin developers just charge for support rather than a subscription fee? So in our research of this, because that's definitely an avenue we have considered, kind of to summarize what Leslie was saying, like, and add a little bit more, basically the people that pay for support that actually would go to the length of paying for a support plan, it generally happened more at an enterprisey level. And just the reality is you're not going to get enough like small tier support plans to make up for, to equal the same amount of revenue you would make from like a small licensing fee for everyone. So, like ultimately if you need X dollars to justify working on a plugin, you're either going to get it by, a very small amount from everyone using it, or you're going to get it with a very large amount from just a few people that are probably going to be enterprise level, and that just tends to gravitate your needs and your or not your needs, but your attention toward their needs. That's not to say that like we're against the idea of people charging for support. We think it's great if you want to try that. It's a little out of scope of the plugin store because we're not trying to be a support system, although that's definitely like in the cards eventually, possibly. It's not something we're saying no, never to, but definitely not an MVP thing. So yeah, I mean, like, if you want to give that a shot, if you want to try open source and just charge for support, go for it. Another great avenue that you might want to check out is Patreon or Open Collective, and just kind of create an account there and encourage people to give you recurring donations there. We also may consider adding some sort of donation-wary aspect to the plugin store where even if it's free, you still have the option to create a one-time or recurring payment donation toward the developer just to support their efforts. These are all really good potential things to explore. But for people that where there's a certain amount of time investment and they feel like they really want to be compensated for their plugin, for them, that's the people that we're really considering right now when it comes to pricing model for the plugin store for commercial plugins. And for them, we want to start out with the most sustainable option as far as we can tell. And so that's kind of been our journey to settling on subscription pricing. We're not saying this is the only way to go. It is, if you want to charge commercially within the plugin store, it is the only way to go, but there's other ways to try and make money as well. If you're just doing it for fun and any kickback you get for a little beer money on the side would be nice, but not something you're factoring into how you pay the bills.
Were there any other arguments that were made in the conversation? I think that there was some good points.
Yeah, and so I've got a couple more. We could try and get through them real quick and then move back to you guys. Yeah, so I mean, one thing, TJ Draper said, I can't find it, and people changed their mind.
He's in attendance, so maybe he can tell us what it was.
Oh, yeah.
What's that?
He's here.
He's
Yeah.
here, so he can tell us. TJ.
Well, so anyways, just to quote him though, I can't find it, and people changed their mind. But once upon a time, Brandon vehemently argued on the side of the issue, on my side of the issue, I guess, against subscription pricing. It used to be on the internet somewhere. So yes, I mean, full disclosure, like, I have changed my mind on this. That is absolutely correct. When I first posted about like my angst against recurring or upgrade pricing or anything like that, that was 8 years ago now. I was a bachelor. I was living at my parents' house, and I had 0 employees. It turns out the real world is more difficult to manage than that. So, what we've found is one-time pricing works for a while. It especially works as long as you have a critical mass of users, and that mass tends to is growing over time. As soon as it flattens out, that's when this like tail of like past purchases and the support that it's generated from them starts to come up to and get you. So, I mean, it's like surfing. As long as you can stay in front of the wave, it's all good. But as soon as that wave dies down, you're going to go under. That was the experience we had with our expression engine add-ons. As soon as that leveled out, it became a support nightmare. There were weeks where I literally couldn't get a single actual development feature in because I was just answering support all week long for people that hadn't paid for years. Yeah, and so we're so far with Craft, it's still growing, so we haven't been bitten by that yet. But it comes for everyone. It comes for everything.
One of the arguments or concerns that I saw that I think is worth pulling out, I forgot who made it. It started with a double M, I think.
Oh, Matt's Nickel or something.
Yeah, he was. I think he was pointing out that he really wants Pixel and Tonic to continue to make its money off Craft somehow, where there was a lot of value in us making the money from the license fee, because it forces us to be beholden to you guys. That's my reframing his argument. So if he's on here or I'm not actually representing that correctly, please someone tell us. And we feel that way too. Like, that's very much our goal. So and there was also some talk about one of the reasons people use Craft is because we were non-standard in terms of other things out there. And that's also very important to us too. It's like there is something unique about how we all interact and work together here that is it's worth fighting for and preserving. So then the question is, how do we as the makers of the software continue to grow it and retain that same spirit? Because all the proven models involve ditching most of you on this call. Like, you can go all the way, I'm dead serious. All the proven business models are go after VC funding and do one of two things: disrupt the enterprise market or become Squarespace and Wix. Both of those markets do not care about you guys at all, or us. And so it's left this huge middle ground that involves all of us that is completely underserved, and the clients feel this too. So think of it from your client's perspective. They have $30,000 to spend. Who's the vendor that's actually going to care about them? There's you. And then when they come back to us, like the software you're offering them, if it's an open source product and we don't get revenue that's aligned with how you care about your client, then there's no incentive for us to do that. And you see this in WordPress land all the time. You see it in Drupal land all the time. Anywhere from $25,000 all the way up to $500,000. It's really difficult to find any software maker that aligns themselves with agencies and freelancers to actually solve these client needs in that middle space. Everyone has gone to the very bottom or the very top. So the things that we're proposing, we have no idea like if they're the right way to go or how they work out, but we believe they're the right direction because it keeps us aligned with you and your client in the current markets that we're talking about. So like SLA support enterprise agreements, like we could probably do that. And the way that goes is we either get VC funding that allows us to staff up with a bunch of senior devs that we charge $70,000 a year for. And then we end up with 20 clients that are funding the majority of our revenue. And we will develop to those 20 clients because that's where the model is. Like that's a shorthanded version of what my opinion on the Drupal community is. But you can see this all the way back in the movable type days. Movable type changed their model to go from unlimited users to per user pricing. And it was the beginning of the end for movable type on that. Because what they were essentially saying is, forget everyone that got us to where we are, we're interested in competing with enterprise. And the majority of CMSs, whether they're open source or not, the ones that have gained traction have all done one of those two things, gone to the low end, the high end, or both, and evacuated the middle. Because for some reason, no one wants to, or very few people want to take these conversations, this community, and this market seriously. And that's from our standpoint, that's a real shame. So we want to stay where we are. So the question is, what is the business model that will allow us to actually grow that market, be sustainable, serve you guys, and develop software for you and your clients instead of for IT managers or prosumers? So like that in the nutshell is the challenge.
I think that the other thing that we haven't talked about is the fact that, bringing it back to Brandon's example of 8 years ago not liking this structure or not needing this structure, in terms of Pixel and Tonic, and for us plugin developers that are going to be building commercial plugins, it makes sense. And even in the chat, for the people that are actually working on projects that make use of our commercial plugins, things are not as beneficial initially, right? Because going to a subscription pricing model is the only, or one of the only sustainable models for Pixel and Tonic and the developers to have a good relationship. And in the end, it obviously kind of allows us to build stronger relationship with our clients, and it benefits them in the long run because they can always feel confident that someone has their back for running their site. Now, the thing is that right away, you're basically saying, this model essentially kind of puts a cap on the type of projects that you can take in because there's going to be some recurring stuff. And basically, you mentioned kind of the litmus test. You basically said, if you need a custom solution and a professional to execute it for you, that's kind of what qualifies as a good potential client. I think another one is kind of like, when you talk about one-time fee for anything, I think that a lot of us can kind of swing it. When you talk about a recurring charge, we kind of have to be using whether it's a tool or a service to kind of generate some income in some way. So if you're targeting, photographers that are, having like weddings and constantly making money, I don't think that the subscription model is going to be a negative to them. It'll be easy to sell them. At least for me, it would be easy to tell my clients, listen, there's a pricing model change, or my new clients it's actually going to be easy. Listen, I charge this much, but then there's this kind of like tie between you and I. It's like a recurring thing. So I think that's the biggest thing. Like Pixel and Tonic or Craft CMS will benefit from this. The commercial plugin developers will benefit from this, and the potential client in the long run. So what kind of material, what kind of workshops, what kind of things can you provide us so that we can clearly communicate that to our clients and make them see the value in what seems to be something like basically they would be getting a kind of like the same value for more money. Essentially, like 8 years ago, you thought, the pricing model, the subscription pricing model was not necessary. You didn't need it to survive. The only thing that changed was your need. But theoretically, you could be providing the same value and the same service. It's just not, it's just not sustainable. So for me, I understand that what you're trying to do is the right thing, but I think we need to realize that the tangible value is for Craft CMS and it's for commercial plugin developers. So for clients, it's possibly tangible, but it's going to be a little harder for us to sell them on that relationship. And you talked about benefits of that relationship. Maybe you can sell them on more products. You mentioned that you may already have some sort of relationship, like paying a monthly hosting fee or whatever, but that's not always the case. That's kind of a recent thing where a lot of us are able to build our own VPS servers on DigitalOcean or whatever. It's become easy, but it has not always been that case. And
well, even if it's not the case, my point there was that there's already a recurring fee involved just to keep the website running. Whether that's because they're paying you directly because you're creating your own VPS hosting thing on top of AWS or something, or it's just they're paying Nexus or Architect or some traditional host. Either way, the point is there's already this concept that, like, to keep my website up, I'm going to have to pay certain recurring fees. I think I don't remember who it was. This came up in chat a while ago. I glanced over and saw something about it, and someone made the point, that a hosting thing, you're actually renting space on a server, so it kind of makes sense. This is just more of this this conversation we have. Like there's different ways you get recurring value out of things. In one case, it's renting space on a box somewhere in the cloud. In other cases, it's you're paying for a developer to continue to maintain, fix bugs, fix security vulnerabilities, keep it updated with the latest craft thing, keep it compatible with various new plugins that are coming out. I mean, there's a whole host of things that need to happen. Hell, even iOS apps are going subscription now.
But
the number of moving parts in iOS is so much. And basically, there you're worrying about platform updates, and that's it.
The biggest point the biggest point that I'm trying to make is that while if you're still obviously you feel strong about your market research and the fact that this is a good model to push us in that direction, right? And as someone that has been around long enough, I believe in you guys, and I think that I'm willing to embrace it. But right now, I think that we need better support from you guys. We need you to be more present in the community. We need you to give us the tools that we need, the proper education. We need you to make it easy to help us see the tangible value, and also work on things that we may not have talked about it yet. The fact that a subscription model does not guarantee that the developer will be around. Like, are there some, I think one of the things in the plugin store was, some sort of certification. I think that if past history could hint at certain things that you're probably thinking or working on, I would venture to say that you're probably going to give that a good try at it. Like, maybe training down the line, maybe a certification, maybe profiles somewhere, or whatever. But those are kind of the things that might make it easy for us to kind of get a sense for the whole picture, or get context into, because right now we're really debating the pricing model. And at the end of the day, I think that as commercial plugin developers, we should be open to the idea that this is the right way to go. The only problem is for some of us that are plugin developers, but are also independent contractors that work with either other agencies or other smaller clients, $5,000 projects, where sometimes we may not even want that relationship. We want to build something and leave it, and you can argue that it will go stale, and there's all kinds of things, right? But I think that those are things that are worth exploring. And
the other thing to consider, though, is like, for this $5,000 project, are you even using commercial plugins? Is that even a thing? Like,
right. So if you aren't, it would be good to at least make sure that the open source plugins that you're using are somewhat considered first party, not necessarily something you just can do on the plugin store.
We do benefit from, like, we might not have the largest ecosystem in the world, but we've got, for people that came from the expression community, we've got an ecosystem that is comparable to to Expression Engine in its heyday right now, it's not nothing. And we benefit from having great developers with multiple mindsets about this stuff. And it turns out that for a lot of these popular applications, there actually are, both an open source alternative and a commercial alternative. And so, choosing the right approach, might be just something you need to take into account when developing the site, based on, if you do want to just build it and leave it and let it go stale, then definitely just veer toward the open source route. Not to say that like open source is inherently like a lesser decision. There's plenty of really great open source offerings that are even better than the commercial counterparts. But it's a factor.
Yeah, that's one thing that you had repeated what I said, but I wanted to clarify that. The case for Craft is professional developer and unique need, not commercial plugin developer and unique need. So the professional developer, whether it's commercial plugin developer, agency, freelancer, open source advocate, like in our minds, those are all first-class citizens in the Craft community. So the nature of this call is talking about what are the commercial options in there, but I think that we're agreed internally here that open source devs are amazing, the plugins are amazing. Like we don't have any, we're not trying to convert someone from open source mindset on plugins into commercial, but the ones that are available commercially, we want to make sure that those have a more sustainable model than one-off pricing in there. To your question, like all the things you said about the things you wish we were providing, I 100% agree. That's all stuff, and if we could do all that stuff right now, we would. It's a matter of what we need to start with can do that. I think between now and Craft 3, we've got some stuff that will help, and post Craft 3, certainly we want to get more of that out there. Of all the conversation of the past week or so, and especially today, the thing that, at least for me, I think is really important to figure out is what do we do about the low, like the nonprofit needs, the charities, the for the actual commercial low-end clients. I actually think that's a much easier sell than we think, based on conversations, because essentially with a subscription model, there's the opportunity that subscriptions are actually easier on their cash flows and budgets. So let's say you have a $5,000 project. If you needed, let's say, 3 or 4 commercial plugins on top of Craft, that might be a fifth of the budget if it's all one upfront pricing. But one of the things that a subscription model can do is distribute that cost over a number of years. So instead of them having to pay, let's say, $500 up front, they might be paying $50 a month instead. And that can be a lot easier sell, especially if they're up against WordPress and they also need commercial plugins from the WordPress world, which are typically more expensive than any of the price points we're talking about right now. So I don't want to paint a rosy picture like saying that's the answer, but that's like internally we are talking about that kind of stuff. And especially those of you that serve low budget clients, I would love to hear more directly about what you do and how you approach it and what might be helpful. So you can email support, ask for me, or email me directly on that. That's something that I think is really worth figuring out a really solid answer for.
Are there any other people that wanted to ask a question? I think there's some plugin developers that might want to jump in.
Yeah, I had a couple of comments real quick. Thanks, Luke.
Really, Andrew.
Okay, I'll be quiet.
Make the comments, Andrew.
You're fired, Luke.
First of all, I wanted to say congratulations to the whole Craft CMS team, because you have outlasted the fierce competition from Enact CMS. I don't know if you saw that. No, I'm not kidding. Their site is down. That like Craft off CMS, their site is now dead. So congratulations for that. Cheers. No, for real. No, but what I wanted to say was in reference to some of A. Alvin's comments about it stagnating the community. I actually kind of look at it from, and he also commented that a lot of the plugins that were made were purpose-driven. And I think that's true, and that's the problem. Unless you have a marketplace and a place for quality developers to actually make money from building plugins, it's just not going to happen. And I, back in the day, we were there when the iPhone first came out, and they didn't have any kind of an app store for it initially. We got early access to it, and we had stuff in there and everything. And what really made the iPhone just absolutely amazing is the app ecosystem that built up around it. So I really think, and it's the same thing even with WordPress today. A lot of the value of WordPress is in a lot of the plugins that can do very specific things. So I actually look at it from the point of view that an officially sanctioned place where plugins where developers are building plugins as products as opposed to solutions to a particular client's needs is really critical in terms of growing the entire ecosystem. So I look at it from a slightly different point of view on that. And I would also say that just in general, I'm not going to say that software as a packaged product is completely dead, but it's pretty close to dead. Just about everything is either service oriented or subscription or freemium, in-app purchase, that type of thing. And pricing models change. And I really do think that if we build a website for a client and we sell them on it from the point of view that we are finishing this thing, and when it's done and it's yours and you never have to do anything with it again, I really think that we're doing them and the ecosystem a disservice by saying that, because it's just not reality. I mean, software is never done. Things are constantly changed. Things need maintenance. It needs updates. It needs all of that. And I think a subscription model is a fantastic way to do it. That's all.
All right. Well, I'd like to get back into the devil's advocate thing because we need to figure out we need to figure out a few things. I think first, one of the things about this composer-driven thing, I heard the word over-engineering in the issue somewhere. I think it was.
I've got the exact quote actually. If you want to hear it, it was you'll never guess. It was Andre. So I totally agree with you about Craft 3 starting to look a little hardcore. To be honest, I'm a little put off by the whole thing. Over-engineering everything from the install process to the business model will not help grow the ecosystem.
Well, yeah, and I think, honestly, I think that it's one of those things that, after you've had time to process this and understand the business model a little bit, maybe you look at it and say, I don't think this really applies or whatever. But there is truth in that as well, because you're essentially trying to seduce people into, getting some buy-in without really, I guess, getting the majority involved, or at least, I guess I don't know what goes behind closed doors. But I know you guys do talk to a lot of people involved in the community. But if I had not been aware of what was happening, I could just recollect the things that are happening, between going like, okay, my code now has to be public. I don't have any option or whatever. And if I want to have a private one, then, or if I have all my projects on GitHub, initially it was, or on Bitbucket, I'm sorry. If all of my projects are private repos on Bitbucket, because I have too many of them, it would be too expensive to get them on GitHub. At first, like a lot of us were confused, and a lot of us thought, well, I guess that's a no for us. But you recently clarified and you said, well, not really. I think that you can use GitHub because packages allows you to hook up to it, or you can use the private packages as well. There are solutions, right? But the idea is that what Alvin was kind of arguing, I think that came from the point of view that all of this is kind of new and we're all used to working a certain way. And a lot of us that do a lot of work in the open source community and promote it and evangelize open source tools and things like that, and we take pride in the work, we can be kind of put off by like things changing rapidly.
Yeah.
Now,
Yeah. I mean, so I think like that's the crux of this is like there's things that are changing, and like over engineering. I don't know if I understand that term.
I
and
can
how
put
it.
it. I can put it into context.
Maybe overthinking or.
Well, if you think about the traditional plugin store, really you have an account somewhere and you upload the recent version and you upload a zip and then you're good to go.
Yeah.
But you know, it can be thought of as over engineering or overthinking if you now have to like make sure that you go to the composer way and do all these things. In reality, I think that based on what I know or I've been able to kind of learn about the processes, that really it's not like over engineering. You're really changing things to take advantage of the tools that are already there. So it kind of
Right.
makes sense for me, right?
Yeah,
Like you're
I mean,
leveraging.
from an engineering perspective, it's simplifying things for us.
Right. The key
You know,
thing though is for us. The key thing is
Yeah.
for us. You know what I mean?
Well, okay, no, that's not necessarily true. Like, okay, right now, like, basically it comes down to two things, as far as I can understand. Like, there were two examples referenced here. I guess the pricing model, the plugin store, and also just like the general composeriness of Craft 3. The composeriness of Craft 3 is an opt-in thing. It's required for the beta, but like when Craft 3 GA comes out, we will still go back to like offering a zip download on the website, zip install. Once you have it installed, whether you installed it from the zip or Composer, you will be able to install plugins either through Composer or through the UI. So like in terms of user experience, once the GA comes out, Composer is happening under the hood, but it's optionally abstracted if you don't want to look at it, if you don't like the terminal. So that's, you know, I mean, that's a temporary issue if you're really terminal adverse or composer adverse. And then as far as the pricing goes, like again, like you know, we've had people requesting that we build a plugin store since day one. It has been you know, Sullivan, like this whole thing, like this was your ticket originally. Like we already planned on it beforehand, but you're one of them. Everyone here probably at one point or another has asked us, you know, if we're going to do a plugin store, when are we going to do a plugin store, etc. It's incredibly clear that there's a demand for this to exist, and it's clear that like whether we do or not, there's going to be an aspect of Craft's plugin ecosystem that is commercial, and we just feel, you know. We've seen these plugin stores when they're successful and when they're not successful. You know, I mean, look at the App Store, or the Mac App Store, with like all the user base that they have, and developers deem it generally unsuccessful for a variety of reasons, but partly because it just doesn't encourage sustainable commercial app practices for the licensing. We want to be extremely deliberate, and we want to finally launch this thing with our best foot forward, using the business model that has been proven to be sustainable in the largest CMS plugin ecosystem there is, as a starting point. If you don't like it, you know, I see a lot of comments from Lindsay and so on about switching it to yearly subscriptions and things like that. Everything's a possibility, but we feel like it's our responsibility as the hosts of this ecosystem to make our best educated guess on what the right first step is, based on, you know, and we have the luxury of seeing it work in the WordPress ecosystem exactly how we've described it. We've got the luxury of seeing their own, you know, those developers reporting how well it has worked for them, hearing from clients or from customers that convert from WordPress to Craft, the fact that like the world didn't blow up, even though that's the way plugin developers went in that ecosystem, you know, and that in the long run it actually worked out just fine. And you know, don't think that like there's any project in Craft's ecosystem that is smaller than projects that happen in the WordPress ecosystem. You know, that there's projects that are significantly smaller happening in that ecosystem that are still dealing with the same subscription pricing and have found that it actually works. That's not to say that our hearts are solid or stone and we're never going to bend on anything, but this is where we're at. We want to do the best we can to set this store up on the right track with the most proven sustainable model we can for the plugins where it makes sense to be commercial in the first place. So yeah, I mean, a lot of things are changing. I don't think anything is over-engineered. Really, we're everything we do from the day one, writing a CMS and managing a CMS is not easy work. Everything we do, we go at it from the standpoint of like, what's the right thing to do and what's the easiest way we can do it? Who can we lean on that has helped us here before, showed us the way before, whatever it is. So definitely don't feel it's over-engineered. Maybe it's overthought, but it's, or at least we've definitely put a lot of research into figuring out what we can do to save ourselves the most amount of work and save ourselves from having to course correct as much as possible by just doing that research up front rather than later.
Well, if I could suggest anything, I think that the delivery has to change a little bit as well. I think that
what does?
The delivery of a lot of these changes that are going through, I think that you need to be a little bit more methodical about dropping those, or how you deliver this news or these kind of changes, because
yeah,
a lot of it comes from the confusion that we ourselves are generating in the craft community. Yeah. I think like it's
we did not expect the volume that came out of it. We expected a nice casual conversation from a few interested parties.
Fair enough.
But
Brandon,
what's that?
Oh, go ahead. I didn't mean to interrupt you. I just had a question, but finish your thought. What's that?
What's that?
This is a point of clarification, and I jumped in after I could squeeze in under the 50 limit. So if you already covered it, forgive me. We touched on this in the Craft Slack channel, but to me, I'm curious how hardcore the subscription pricing is in terms of, it's like a super small detail, but I think it would have a major effect for me personally, and I think maybe in terms of how people are digesting this. But I have no problem with the idea, and I think it'd be easy to sell in a number of different ways to clients. With like, you're going to pay recurring to keep your plugin and potentially the CMS up to date. But is it the idea of when that kind of yearly subscription or whatever it is that you pay for, when it lapses or you pass that date, you're going to get some kind of giant red bar in the CMS admin that's basically like, you're running software that isn't.
You're a horrible person, basically.
What's that? You're a horrible person, right? Yeah. Or it's more akin to, I think, what I've seen with at least some plugins, like Ryan Meshuggah was saying in the EE world, where it's, if you ever want to update this thing again, you have to renew your license, but there isn't some big flag, or if you choose to, for one reason or another, like, you don't have to touch the site again, and if it's working, it's working.
Right, so I touched on this on GitHub, but my argument comes down to two things. First of all, like, that's what's the Jack Sparrow quote? The only rules here are what a man can do and a man can't do. We can't do that. The reason is because plugins are managed by Composer. Craft can't like tell Composer, hey, don't update this plugin because this guy's an asshole and he's not paying. So limiting updates is not an option. Limiting support's not an option because we're not managing support. Maybe down the road we are, but right now we're not. So what can we do? We can nag people in the control panel and say they've run out of their subscription. And point number two is, even if we could do the first two things, like that model works for certain things. I don't think it works. I don't think it's a responsible model for anything web software related, because it is not in anyone's interest to prevent a security update from getting downloaded to a website, even if they're out of their, even if their subscription is lapsed. It is not in anyone's interest to prevent access to these critical updates, as things, what happens if they have access to the Craft 4, but but half their plugins aren't compatible with Craft 4 yet, and now the whole site blows up. Like I would rather, like, in my opinion, the worst experience would be limiting access to updates. I think it would be a better experience to just throw a little naggler to the top of the control panel, but let everything continue to work, let everything continue to update, let them get the latest security updates, let them get everything, and just have a subtle reminder, or not so subtle reminder at the top of the control panel saying, hey, nice if you renewed your subscription now.
That makes sense. Cool. That's helpful.
That's my opinion. I just think, in an environment where there's so many moving parts, and where there's security vulnerabilities, like the web is extremely susceptible to security vulnerabilities, it's just absolutely not the responsible thing for us to put a system in place that would limit access to updates ever.
That makes sense.
Or limit the actual functionality. Like one model that came up is Yoast, the SEO plugin, and they actually, because it's an SEO plugin that has to know everything about everything going on in the system, it's able to kind of monitor how many changes are going on to the content, to the structure of the content, to WordPress, and then basically it kind of locks itself out of working after the site seems to have been changed at a certain point, which is works for Yoast, I guess, because that's their hand is in every aspect of that CMS. But with Craft, I just don't think, as a general rule, I don't think that model really works. So
you touched on this when you were responding. I think it was in Slack. And I think the point is valid. The idea of if you're not sort of selling recurring support in some package, like we should all be thinking about it. And I feel like that's a conversation that's been happening off and on just in Craft Slack in general. Yeah. And I feel like if everything stays in its current course and kind of moves ahead, my hope, I guess, this is off the cuff, is like I could see the community kind of coming together in response to this. And this will change the way we sell craft. But as a community, I feel like there could be a larger conversation and even materials put together where it's like, let's just solve this with a hive mind and figure out how to package and sell if you're not already doing it. And, and like you're saying, it's a good way, and it's probably the right way to sell up front. It's probably just uncomfortable for folks if that's not the way we're currently doing it. But
maybe a good time to plug this in. Like, there's been rumblings. There is going to be a craft conference later this year. We're looking at either September or October, dates to be announced in the next couple weeks. And that seems like it's going, and to be clear, like Craft 3 will not be out at that point. It will absolutely, be a couple months later at the least, because we have this opinion that we don't really want to support a brand new GA release that gets out like shortly before a conference. So anyways, that would be a really good opportunity for this sort of conversation to happen among other places. But yes, I totally agree. We need to do our part to create resources. That needs to be done hand in hand with the community, because you guys are the ones that are actually on the front lines learning what works and what doesn't. And a lot of you came from the WordPress world where you're used to this conversation already. We want what worked for you, what still works for you if you're still doing that stuff. And yeah, exactly. Hive-mind it up. Let's build a bank of resources for this. And I honestly think we can come together and we can, as a community, mature in a way and do a better job selling projects that are sustainable for ourselves. Or I'm speaking not for myself personally, but as the community goes.
And to that end, I think John had a question regarding commerce. So John.
Right, my audio on.
Yeah.
So I'll kind of two things, kind of a comment and a question. One, and maybe I missed a lot of this earlier on, but there's been a lot of conversation about the kind of viability of developers and viability of the platform. Totally legitimate, but as someone who is also an agency selling craft, I have had conversations with big clients with big budgets that kind of categorically will not go with a subscription model pricing for a feature, because their accounting just does not work that way. They will pay for a 600-pound per day freelancer to come in and do a subpar job for a project, as opposed to hiring someone full time because their financing doesn't work that way. So I kind of feel
like that's, I actually saw you mention that, and I totally forgot to address it, but that could be solved with a gift card. Sell them a gift card that is the equivalent of 10 years of subscription, one purchase, and then like that is the fund for the next 10 years of license fees. Like
so I mean, that's a good point, but I think what that kind of speaks to is that you could flip it, right? You could also say, so Leslie, for example, with the nonprofit client that has a low budget, you could also very well say, as the agency, listen, I'll establish a long relationship with you. I will cover your fees, and then you can pay me over time. And we've done that with clients. We've said, we know that this is a big upfront spend for you. We're happy to kind of break that out. But I think what perhaps is kind of happening in this kind of initial moment is that there is, it's like borderline coercion. It's like, okay, this is our way. If you want to deviate from it, it's going to be up to you to work around it. And I think that's the initial reaction. I mean, I think, the arguments for, the sustainability of that of this kind of subscription business model is totally valid. There are, not everyone does it. There's not every business operates in a subscription model. So I think there's a, legitimate chance that there is a break in customer base, and maybe you'll bring in new customers and you're going to be great, but there are going to be some that are going to move. But kind of that aside as a comment, what I do genuinely want to know is your experience with Commerce as a plugin being sold for $999, because I feel like you guys, planted a flag in the sand with this. And as P&T, back when you were doing plugin development for Expression Engine, you were the first to demand more money for your product and say, we develop quality code and we deserve money that is akin to that quality, that amount of effort we put into it. And then Commerce took it to another level. And like, I was so ecstatic that you guys released Commerce as a plugin that was basically 4 digits. I thought that was an admirable thing, and that was leading the way. So, we rely on P&T a lot. I mean, all of us, we've established a business based on your intuition, on your research, on your gut, on your skill. So this, to a lot of us, this is a big sea change. So I guess I'm curious to know, just kind of from a real world point of view, what has it been like selling Commerce for $1,000? Has it, do you think about this move basically saying $1,000 actually wasn't cutting it for us? Or, hey, actually it has been working, but we still think that maybe the subscription model is still better?
Oh, me?
Make Brad answer that.
It is enough and it isn't enough. Like it's
if we had charged less, we'd be losing money on it.
Yeah.
So it is priced at a bare minimum that's turned out to be just above break even. Some of that is because it's a 1.x project.
Yeah.
Some of it because commerce builds are way more complicated than marketing sites. And so for commerce specifically, I don't think that any of us here at Pixel Tonic, or the better way to say it is, we all agree that a subscription price for commerce would have been a much better way to go, because of just, a CMS is complicated. Adding commerce on top of that is infinitely more complicated there. So commerce sales have done well. They're better than we expected. And I don't know if Luke's having a blast right at this moment.
I think my microphone's on. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yeah, I was just going to say, it probably just goes back to Brandon's point about like the analogy of the wave. Like Commerce has been out now for nearly 2 years. And so now I think like the sales have been good, and it's probably been paying for me and all that kind of thing. But we can see that wave getting bigger, and we need to stay in front of it. And we don't want to let any of the existing customers down or future customers with support. So
I think the unexpected part about commerce is just how expansive those builds got so quickly. Like earlier this week, I guess we're under a friendier for part of that, but we had a team show us like a build out for a national brand that they did on Craft Commerce that just blew us away. I mean, Luke and I were sitting on that call, watching them, how they'd integrated with all these different systems, brought in multiple brands, did all these things. The guys at the Parliament showed us behind the scenes on Icon Motorsports. And there we have the same concerns that we do about craft. So here are these people that have, these shops that have built out builds that are well into the six figures, but well short of enterprise. And at some point, if they come back, if the end clients come back to us, we have to have a better model that allows us to address that. And then also just simply captures the value of it so that as the requests come in, we are able to build up that product in the same way that we can build up craft. So it's profitable, but to get on the risk of getting too businessy, the net margin's not high enough for what we're currently doing for the type of work that's being done on it.
So does that, I mean, do you guys, when you think about how the pricing model moves from one time to subscription, do you imagine that the price basically stays the same, or do you envision a significant drop or a variable drop? I mean, there's the Soul Space, the kind of plugin prices that are out there now. There aren't that many, but they're all $100 or less. I mean, I totally appreciate that over 5 or 10 years, $500. It's not. I know it's not a lot. And our clients, we probably could very easily just completely obscure it away, like we already do, in all honesty, and still kind of get away with it. It's a mental shift, and also there's a bit of like, how much is this going to cost me? Well, it's going to basically cost you this, versus how much is it going to cost me? Well, it's kind of basically going to cost you this, I think, but like per year, I think, and it kind of depends on the situation, and you know what I mean? It makes it a far more complicated, like, kind of awkward conversation. There are people out there that, like me, that are just kind of lazy, don't like that stuff, like to kind of like grease that part of the handshake with the client, But anyways, kind of back to my original question. What do you guys think about pricing? I mean, what's Soul Space Freeform? What does that become? How much does that become when it goes onto the store at a subscription-based model?
I think this was a big unknown about whether like the upfront quote retail price is going to decrease and spread out over a number of years instead, or whether we'll stay the same and recurring on that. And I think a lot of that will come down to if the developer is currently successful enough that they at least have one part-time employee based on it, because decreasing the initial price will impact cash flow and make the transition harder. So I think I would expect that someone like Soul Space, that they will keep their subscription prices higher, but not necessarily. I mean, I don't want to speak for Mitchell, like, or maybe I should. I know what he'll know. No, but but the point being, if you already have employees, like for us, if this were turned around and Craft were plug-in mod, or if Luke's salary depended on commerce subscriptions, for example, using just that, plug your ears, Luke. If we cut commerce pricing to a third of what it is and just assume that we would make it up because they're going to be on commerce for 4 years, then we would run out of cash to pay Luke. So,
wait, you guys are paying me?
Well, eventually we will. We'll get there. But so a lot of it depends on where they are currently. I think what will happen is that there'll be an evaluation of, is this providing a specific business value that deserves a higher price, or is this a utility that needs to have some maintenance revenue to keep it going? So something simple, maybe it's $10, and right now it might be charged 50, but if it's going to be recurring, it's like, well, that doesn't make any sense. I would rather sell a lot of these because I know the type of support tickets I'm going to get. are pretty going to be across the board. So I think that that's going to be one of the major learning curves that we won't really know until it's in the store and we're getting feedback, not just from you guys, but also from your clients. But I expect there to be a lot of, a learning curve is probably the nice way to say that in there. And for us, for commerce, it's less about cost and more about what market is commerce meant to serve. Like that's, if it really is supposed to sit between a middle space between Shopify and Enterprise Magento, then we need to be charging more for it. And then that goes quickly back to the question of, but what about low-end shops or low-end budgets in there? And so I think for both commerce and craft, we have some thinking to do on what that may or may not look like. The point that you made, though, that I think is really important to us is when it comes to talking about this with clients, it needs to be simple. Like it needs just like, yeah, it's a one-off price. Like, yeah, it's this. Like, and here's the sheet, and it's easy for you to get, and it's easy for the client to see. And then if it's easy for them to see, then the secondary, then the next important question is, are they going to, is it valuable to them?
Right.
So, and that's
going back, I think it was Adrian mentioned somewhere, like we don't want to be like Drupal Acquia. Like, so as part of the research, I don't know if you can still find it, but I'm happy to send you my copy. The state of Ohio got into a contract with Acquia, and because of the state of Ohio's transparency laws, at least at the time, we were actually able to get Acquia Drupal's contact with the state of Ohio, and it just blew my mind. It is literally like an 18-page, 9-point font SKU list of everything they do that is blown away. And you can see John Case's signature at the very end of it. And you read through that thing and you just kind of want to stick it in the fireplace and never enter into that world ever again. So yes to simple and figuring out for us common folk.
And that's a really good point, because
that said, if John Kasich wants to do business with Craft, we'll be happy to.
Yeah.
One point that like that part right there is kind of for the benefit of sales or being able to close out on projects and proposals and things like that. At some point, because like people that come from WordPress or other places, sometimes they even have a hard time with the pro license in Craft or whatever, and it's only one time now. It could change in the future, like you said.
Yeah.
But really, when you're talking about building a site for yourself or whatever, there's no money involved, and people that expect something free. And I'm not saying that they should expect it for free, but again, we're talking about mindset and changing somebody's mindset. So
can I just challenge the premise here? Like, our experience from people that come from WordPress world is they are actually expecting subscription pricing, and they are not expecting free. WordPress itself may be free, but the average WordPress build is more expensive than Craft, and it is more expensive every single year. They are definitely like, don't paint that community as like a bunch of freeloaders. They are used to spending money.
No, I'm talking about for the CMS itself, like.
But I mean, it all gets lumped into it's the website, like it's like they're not. They're not pitching WordPress to their clients because WordPress is free, and then like, oh, surprise, here's a bunch of extra transactions you're going to need to pay. Like, they're up front, here's the cost this website's going to take to run, and it's $600 a year, or it's $800 a year, whatever it is. Like, it's
and I think that's what we need to get better at. But obviously, I think that very few of us are practicing that, because a lot of us are independent, or we're collaborating with other agencies, and I think that some of us don't want to grow. There are some real pains in growth, right? Because the people that have attempted to grow, partner with somebody else, sometimes they thrive on that, and they just want to get bigger, hire more people, get bigger projects, while others just want to stay small and deal with the 5K clients or whatever. And I'm not saying that like the idea here is that it's not your guys' fault, or it's not something that you're doing. You're not doing as wrong. Like that, I want to make that clear. The idea is, how do we have that mindset to help us, kind of wrap our heads around everything that this means to us, and to be able to, deliver a proposal on a project, have a sane conversation about cost involved, be able to narrow down the scope, and then be able to close down that deal and focus on the development. The quicker we can get to handshake to actually coding, I think that's great, and we can take all the help. But the reason I brought that community up is because a lot of people that come from, a lot of the freeloaders, whether they come from WordPress or any others, they have this mentality where, okay, why do I have to pay for this now? Well, one of the things that has been made a point is, if you think that the license is an issue when you're not building for yourself but for a client, if you think that you don't want to sell the client on a $300 license, just make it part of your budget, right? You can just say, okay, if you're gonna charge $5,000, $5,300 is just not that big of a deal. So you can, but the moment you start to, and it's basically like, here's the bid, here's what it's going to cost, done. And but now you're talking about variable, potentially variable pricing in terms of, okay, I'm gonna need commerce, I'm gonna need X plugin, Y plugin, whatever. You do your bidding or you do your proposal, and then like that part right there, I haven't done it, so I don't know that it's going to be messy, but it feels like it might be added sort of like weirdness to it. So the thing is,
no, so I mean, like, it's again, this, I think this is just a maturing process.
Sure.
And it's going, or maturing is maybe the wrong word, but it's an adjustment, and it's going to take getting used to. There's going to be some discomfort. But again, that's why we're bringing this up now and not the day that the store launches. We want to give everyone enough heads up that this is what we're thinking. This is why we're thinking it. This is where we're going, so that the community as a whole has adequate time to internalize it, to prepare for it, to start talking to each other, to do the hive mind thing, and come up with a plan. Come up with like, okay, let's, So I totally agree. Like, not to discredit what you're saying. I guess like the whole point of talking about this now is specifically for what you're saying right here, which is yes, we have to learn how to handle this sort of conversation. And now we've got a nice heads up. Everyone's got a nice heads up, and we have time to kind of wrap our heads around that and figure that conversation out.
And what I would like you guys to do is that when this comes up in the context of specific clients, to let me know, because this is the thing that I will get on the phone with you. I'll review proposals, scopes of work, how it's being pitched. I'll get on the phone with your clients if that proves to be helpful, because this is a thing that the concern is real, but the solution has to be based on the specifics that you're seeing. So is this objection going to show up in a $5,000 project, or does the cash flow advantage of subscription, is that a real answer or not? Well, we don't know until we try selling it. Is this thing not working? But then who's it not working for? Like, is it for the $30,000 clients not working, or the nonprofit thing? So, like, assuming that in the long term we do end up being in tiers, one of the things, like one of the hardest parts for us is that we almost never have a conversation with a direct end user. Like, the vast majority of our customers are agencies and developers and freelancers, and someone else has already sold them on Craft, and we hear like a small fraction of those conversations. And so when we get into conversations like this, and we hear valid concerns, what we don't have, and what we would love to have, is the ability to talk through the specifics of how that came up and what the actual objections were within the context of what the specific project was in there. Because from a high strategy stuff, we can go back and forth about this stuff, and that's really valuable. But in terms of figuring out the specific solutions that work, what we need is, this client cussed me out for an hour when I told them about subscriptions. I want you to call me, send me an email, and say, tell me about this client. What were they? What was the situation? Can we figure this out? Is there a way to go back in and make that better? Because that's my job here at Pixel Tonic, is to be your advocate and hear back that feedback, so we can go back and have that actual experience from your clients that we work together to figure out a solution for, or we just have to say we responsibly can't deliver what they're asking for in there. But then when we're saying that, it's based on a real conversation with you instead of some high-minded, we did the research thing.
So is this something that is teachable? I mean,
Yes.
I think that the fact that you're offering to be someone that can be there to support us through it, I think that's great. I mean, you don't get that from WordPress or any other other CMSs or any other platform. So I think that alone is a huge benefit. And I think that what can you say about teaching a men to fish with as it applies to this?
Yeah, I definitely think it's teachable. I don't know that we want to teach the case for craft, and I can put you in touch with a whole bunch of people that teach the case for yourself and your business.
Sure.
That's something that we actually thought about. Should, like, whatever our version of the pro network is, should part of our responsibility be that? But like, I can be a connector to those sorts of resources, and then the why craft part is where we can be really valuable together. But yeah, if you ever want to talk business model stuff, or maybe we definitely at the craft conference, this is something we'll be talking about for sure. But yeah, like one of the things that we want to do surveys, get feedback, not just from you guys, but from your own clients, provide that information back in the community. And we're working to build out like a why craft page right now that is not geared towards our core audience, but is something that ideally you'll be able to link to your clients. And we want to get there faster, but it's a matter of the reality that we're a small business. So until we have those resources available, please feel free to email me or hit me up in Slack, and I'm happy to talk through specific projects or specific client feedback with you on there.
And that's great to hear, because I think like having the knowledge and how to sell craft, like having the ability to present something and feel confident about it. It's kind of like there's a book, something called The Art of Seduction or something, but it teaches you like how to confidently sell something or increase your rate of proposal approval and things like that. Really interesting stuff, but really just kind of understanding to explain the value of this subscription-based model and craft itself. It's going to be really useful. One thing that I was kind of thinking about, I know that as part of subscription-based business models, other companies have relied on developer advocates. And take PHP Storm, for example, or JetBrains as a whole. They recently went through a firestorm because they changed their model price, or their pricing model. So the idea is that, I don't know if we can all agree on this, but personally, a lot of us try to shy away from subscriptions. So for one end of the equation, when you're talking about apps, I realize that that's different than plugins, but PHP Storm had to, they went through that subscription model. And one of the things that was hugely beneficial to them was developer advocates, because they had a core group of people that can educate on how to sell other people, how to train other people in doing this. And I don't know if that would be something that PNT would consider, is that, obviously just like the one-time pricing model is not sustainable, Leslie Camacho on the phone helping a developer, I don't think it's scalable or sustainable. So
no, it's not.
So how do you develop a network of developer advocates to be able to not just, be able to help other people on these calls or educate other people on how to embrace the pricing model, but also really close deals that in the end, it's earning a client for them as a developer, but also for craft, and creating higher acquisition and better retention. So is that something you consider at some point or have considered?
Yeah. So there are some companies that I specifically look to that I think do this very well. I think Basecamp does a very good job of this. I don't necessarily like Basecamp as a product, but their advocacy is phenomenal in terms of their onboarding and training that happens in real time on webinars. it's a little bit on the enterprisey side, but it didn't start that way. There's a Kanban system called LeanKit that has really great consumer advocacy behind it. You already mentioned JetBrains. All those things require staff and materials. So that's one of the things is like, where do we start on that? So that is definitely something that I personally would like to see happen. I consider like jumping on the phone, everything we do right now to be research to how we spread this out. Or like from the expression engine community, Jay, Createe does these webinars once a month, like the introduction to expression engine. So we've talked about things like that or other models. But the first thing is get marketing materials out that everyone can use. The second is we're working on the Craft Experts program. We're waiting on Craft 3 because we got to eat our own dog food with that stuff. And the showcase will come along with that. And so if we have a YCraft page as the start for sales and marketing material, the experts program, and the showcase that everyone can participate in those three things, that gives us the groundwork to do that. So those are the top three things from a marketing and advocacy standpoint that we're working on. And past that, it would be, all right, now how can we make us all better at what we do? And that gets into more of the programs that you're talking about.
Awesome.
So as a starting point, I'm happy to put together a resource list of places that I've gone to over the years for that. The number one thing I would say would be to get yourself to Owner Summit, put on by the Bureau of Digital Affairs. That is a fantastic business, creative agency and software agency business summit to go to on there. But yeah, long story short, I agree with you. I can't do it yet. We're working on it.
Sounds good. I think Lindsay had something.
Yeah, I'm being pushed into the conversation here. So my main concern is something that has come up a little bit on the chat on the side here, and it came up earlier in Slack. It hasn't actually come up on the video at all, so I guess now is the time to talk about it, which is, let's say I'm an agency and I want to buy a license for plugin X for this site. You guys have talked about bulk pricing. That's certainly a factor. There's this, I think ultimately the question is about who owns the license, because when you start talking about things like bulk pricing, it's inevitably about the developer, the agency owning the license. So if the developer / agency is owning the license, to me, that actually creates a lot more problems than it solves. And my perspective on it is that the licenses should all be directly tied to the website itself, regardless of who paid for it or in what circumstances.
So I saw you mention this on Slack. Here's the thing. If someone buys a plugin license with their own account and it's for some website, it doesn't matter what the website is. Like, they are going to be under the impression that they own it. And by saying, hey, guess what? I don't care who bought it. It's actually owned by the website, and whoever owns the website actually owns all the plugins regardless of who bought them. That creates a big legal conundrum that we do not want to get in the middle of. That's basically where it comes down to. So, like, a website, like a craft license, is associated with the domain, which does not necessarily explain who owns the craft license. It's more just there's a relationship there. We know for every craft license that's on public domain, which domain it's tied to. In the same way, all plugin licenses will be associated with craft licenses, assuming they've been synced up with one. But separately, like, there will be a specific owner of all licenses. So all licenses, whoever, and basically, like, our perspective on this right now is, because we don't have like an official policy on transferring ownership, so we consider all licenses to be owned by whatever email bought the license in the first place. If that's not accurate, if there has been some secondhand transaction of that license from developer to client or from developer to a separate agency or whatever it is. We have no way of finding out about that right now. So we were never updated. We are solving that. That will be solved before any of this launches, before the plugin store launches, most likely, with a new user account system we're going to call Craft ID, kind of like Apple ID. So id.craftcms.com. You'll be able to log in there, manage your licenses, transfer licenses to other emails or Craft ID accounts if there is one. But to keep us out of legal trouble, we need to have a policy on who owns it, and we need to have like a clear, like, it needs to be much more clear than like what site is it tied to right now.
Right. So, okay. So clearly I'm not a lawyer. I'm not going to claim that I know.
I mean, we aren't either, but we've been in the middle of license ownership conflicts.
We paid a lawyer a lot of money.
And we've paid a lawyer a lot of money, and we need to have a policy here and practices here that make the most sense, or that are the most in line with what people's expectations are going to be, which is if you bought the plugin, you should think you own it, and it's your choice whether it's registered with site A or site B, regardless of who owns those sites. And then if you decide you were actually buying it on the client's behalf and you have a contract with the client or a relationship with the client where that was the assumption, like, yeah, you were paying for it, but it's really the client's property and it was a line item in their invoice or whatever it is, then you can correct that by after the fact transferring it to their account or whatever. But that's kind of your choice, and that's up to you and your client.
What's the recommended?
So I respect the fact that there's a legal component to this, and sadly I can't speak to that at all. But if you take the legal aspect out of it, if I go down the list of pros and cons, it really seems like, I mean, I seriously, like, I don't know the legal issue. I'd like to think that a legal case could be made for whatever the technical solution is that made sense. You solve the technical problem first, and then you build the legal case around that, unless you're breaking a law, but you're not going to be breaking a law in this case. So, my perspective on it is that if you go down the line of, why would the client own it versus why would the developer own it, there is a very strong case to be made for the client owning all plugins for the site at all times. I mean, regardless of how it was paid for. Now, I do hear what you're saying about.
So like, we're not doing anything to prevent that. Like, if that's the way you do business, if you prefer your clients to own all the licenses for all the things, you can do that. There's nothing stopping you. You like, in that case, they won't take advantage of bulk, of 2+ license discounts or anything like that. Maybe that's fine. Like, they're only paying for one license. They don't care about a discount. So we're not doing anything to prevent that. Basically, like, either they can be the ones to pay for it with their own Craft ID accounts, or you can pay for it, and just because of the nature of your relationship with them, you immediately transfer it off to their account, or their, associate their email with it. Either way, we would then be under the opinion that this license is now owned by them, not you.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, we're not. It's going to be a relatively, like, open. You can kind of do this however you want. If the case is that you consider yourself to be the owner of these licenses and you are kind of leasing those licenses out to your clients, which is the way a lot of agencies work, maybe not freelancers as much, but definitely agencies, in that case, they can take advantage of, the bulk purchase options and stuff like that, because they, in that case, they own it and they're kind of leasing like a seat within that license off to their client. But we want to solve all. We want to make a system where both cases work just as well, because they are both just as common as each other.
Right. Okay. Yeah. I'm pushing up against the edge of my knowledge here, so I'll pull back and I'll let somebody else jump in if they have strong opinions.
I mean, and basically, the takeaway is, like, however you want to manage licenses with your clients, whether it's you own it or they own it, we're facilitating that. And we've heard all of the scenarios. We've heard all the ways
to follow
up.
Just to follow up on that, then, is there any difference between the agency or developer owning it versus the client or owner of the site in terms of liability. Obviously, if you're an agency that buys a lot of these things, if they own it or purchase it themselves, you mentioned there's no benefit to bundling or the bulk purchasing or whatever. So aside from that, is there any recommendation for liability purposes that you would say, I recommend you buy it yourself, or you make sure they buy it themselves, because once you let them buy it, you're liable for X and Y? Is there anything that matters? Is there any difference liability wise? Who owns it?
I think as long as it's really clear to all parties who owns it, and that's just understood, then no. I mean, there's no one scenario is going to be any more risky than the other in terms of that.
Okay.
Yeah. I mean, say there's a dispute and you are the developer and you have the licenses. And in that scenario, you're the clear owner. It says so. Hopefully you are upfront about that fact with your client. I'm going to manage these for you. We're on a technical maintenance retainer. At any point you want to terminate the contract, I will transfer these to you, and you'll take on the subscription fees for that, for it. And they'll have, like, you can clearly say this is what it's going to be. And they say, for whatever reason, that ends badly. And they start demanding all these license fees from you anyway. Well, they're not paying for them necessarily at that point. So what are they disputing? If they want to continue using that stuff, they just sign into their craft install, purchase it, disassociate you, and they have everything they need at that point, and at least from a legal perspective. The biggest liability is on us as the software vendor, usually in those disputes, where the thing that we want to avoid is giving someone access to something that they shouldn't have. And we don't have a really good way of doing that right now, and thankfully it hasn't been an issue. But most of the majority of the liability stuff should be handled in the contract. And the licenses would be a very, very small part of that, unless you're charging an amazing amount for just the license fees. Like, there's not enough dollar value in the license itself, because typically in a liability dispute or ownership, you're only accountable, unless you cause damage to them somehow, you're only accountable for the total cost of their license.
Makes sense.
And they have an easy way to remedy that, and that's pick up the subscription themselves.
And if a developer owns a license on a site that engages in illegal gambling or something like that, that would be a whole different.
This is another conversation.
Does anybody have questions? Yeah, go ahead.
Let me ask like a quick follow up to what we were talking about a minute ago, and there's actually a tangent question first. The tangent question is the bulk pricing going to be all at once, or is it cumulative? If I remember correctly, Expression Engine did a cumulative thing where when you buy your 5th license, the price goes down. And
yeah, so I kind of outlined the formula on GitHub, but basically my thinking is, like, as long as you are the one owning all the licenses, if you want to be the agency managing multiple licenses for your clients, let's say you've bought, for simple math, let's say the plugin costs $100 base price and $150 for the 2 to 5 license package. And let's say you buy the 1 license thing and you're 6 months in, so you've kind of used up like 50% of the value of that $100 you spent. And then you want to update to 2. Like, basically what we do is we would just prorate whatever you've used up already and kind of treat it as like a discount, like almost refunding you for whatever part of that license you're not using, and at the same time collecting more money for you for, like, to renew at a higher license fee going forward. So for simple math, if it's a $100 license and you're 6 months in, you've basically taken $50 value out of that $100. So if you want at that point to update to the 2 to 5 license package, it would be $150 minus the $50 that you hadn't used yet of that first license. So you'd basically be able to upgrade to $100 and kind of start a new. Does that make sense? Like,
prorated. I think they call that prorated upgrades.
Yeah.
So it makes sense.
It's a prorated upgrade. So
now, what if it's a scenario where you're not doing this back to back? What if it's a scenario where, this year I go out and buy Freeform, and then next year I need another copy of Freeform for a different website? Do I suddenly get the bulk discount for having bought a second?
No, I mean, like, so if you if the site A that you built year one goes away, then you would just keep the one site license and, disassociate it from the first site.
Not goes away. Just like I built that site's running happy, and I'm building this.
As long as that site's running, and as long as it's running freeform, we're going to, like with the subscription model, that subscription is going to need to be renewed.
What I'm saying is this. So I said a year, forget about a year. Say it's like 10 days later, but it's an unrelated site. It's not, I don't know. I don't want to lose the example here, but I bought one and then I go back later, some indefinite time later to buy a second one. Do I automatically get this bundle deal that you're talking about?
So that's the thing. So it's a prorated upgrade. So basically you would upgrade your single site license to the bulk 2.2 to 5 site license at a prorated fee based on like however much you hadn't used of the original license.
No, one quick note on this is that I think that these are the easier ones to document things, right, on a formal post on PNT or on the show notes. I think these are a little easier to answer. Are there any questions that are probably harder to explain on a document about the changes? Because right now, like all we know about this plugin store is what was said and has been discussed on the issues. And I think that either on the show notes in this or maybe PNT can put up a blog or something. But I think that, if someone wants to, if we want to provide good information for other people, there are some things that we can go down the list and say, yeah, open source plugins are supported and they can be installed. The license model is prorated, upgraded, etc. Are there some things that would still be useful to kind of talk about that would not be easy to document later for everybody's consumption? While we're all here kind of, throwing things on the board here. No questions?
You ask him, sir.
Yeah, I guess I'm just trying to see if anybody gonna give everybody else a chance to kind of ask questions specific, that have to do with the pricing model or something else. If they have any questions, because we're going on I think 2 hours and 18 minutes right now.
We're down to 28.
I would say if there's nothing majorly pressing, we should probably call it a day at this point.
Yeah.
Give people a break.
Yeah, I think this is probably a good place to wrap it up then, and I don't know if we were able to answer all of the questions, because I think what Lindsay brought up is one of those kind of one of those things that people are going to be wondering about, and I think that those are the questions that'll be good to formalize.
Putting some sort of FAQ out would definitely make sense at some point. We're hoping that this would be, kind of under the radar. Not
sure.
Not that we don't want the word to get out, but I don't know if we're at the point where we're ready to start posting about it on the blog, just because.
Sure.
This is we're communicating this more as a way to prepare the core community rather than a formal announcement. So
okay, makes sense.
But yeah, putting maybe it's worth updating the GitHub issue with here's the master FAQ list so far that we have and point people with that or
something
like that. It's a good idea.
But I think personally,
and if this goes public, I would love to be able to link to this as well, this video.
Okay, yeah, I'll try to. As soon as this is over, it'll probably take a little time to process, but then I'll probably be able to post this soon after that, as soon as I can. And I think just to kind of my personal opinion on the whole pricing model. Again, I think that it's really difficult when you're being asked to kind of choke something down your it kind of feels like arm twist in a way, but it's really not. I've talked to you guys, I've known you for a good bit, and I've been around the community, so I think that hopefully anybody out there watching that was not part of this conversation can at least take away the fact that it feels like you guys are trying to do the right thing, and you're trying to make the community not necessarily huge or to include everybody, but at the same time have a good business model around and try to push for the right solutions that will be better for us.
I think like I can probably sum up like our stance in this.
Sure.
Like everyone here presumably likes craft a lot, and finds it to be a pretty flexible system and all that. Everything you like about craft is because we put an insane amount of effort into like thinking through all the scenarios up front and releasing a 1.0 that had the most flexible base system we could possibly imagine, like that addressed all the needs we were aware of from our past experience and all that kind of stuff. And we are taking that exact same mentality with the plugin store. It might be a massive shift from what you're used to. I guess our ask here is that you guys keep the conversation going, but also like try and have an open mind, and consider like we do have both freelancers and agencies and plugin developers needs and business problems and everything at heart. Take all that to heart. Our door is open. We want to know what your struggles are. We want to know your feedback. And please do, again, like as Leslie said multiple times, write in support@craftcms.com if you have any feedback specifically for your scenario. But in general, I guess the ask is like just try to keep an open mind and let's all hit this thing together. And with any luck, the plugin store will be in its own right just as much of a success as Craft itself has been so far. So.
Yeah, and you can think of pricing feedback, specifically the type that I asked for, as like a bug report. Like the more specific it is, my client is this, their budget was this is my concern with this particular thing. Here are some other options, or I don't know what the answer is, but here's the information where we feel that would be helpful, because that way we can start putting the business model issues into groups, just like we would in other bug reports or feature requests in there as well. And the more concrete information we have about who your clients are specifically, the more it helps us figure out what the options are and how to work with you on that.
Awesome.
Oh
yeah, if I can just chime in there after what you said, Sylvan, and because Andrew's bugging me to say something.
Say something.
I'm completely 100% behind what Brandon and the Pixel Tonic team want to do. I think it's certainly rocking the boat a little bit with subscription pricing, but I think that's probably a good thing. And I 100% trust what the Pixel Tonic guys are doing. So I'm interested to get behind it, and like Brandon was just saying, approaching it with a bit of an open mind. So interested to see how it develops, and we can keep talking about all the finer details of pricing and licensing and all that stuff. But I think it's good.
Awesome. I think we should probably give Fred a chance to, because he just deployed his 320-second plugin.
It's actually the 4,000. I got 4,363.
363.
I can use this as an opportunity to say it's because I have 100 Chinese programmers. So, and they are cheap, but they're not that cheap. So money will help. They can get a little bit better noodles. But honestly,
not horrible at all.
This is a perfect way to round it off. But my 2 cents. So I just I've been enjoying plugin development for a while now, but I just started with commercial plugins, so I have no idea what I'm doing. It's kind of like an interesting timing for this, like me starting out with commercial plugin development and this. So I don't know. I have a open mind and a little bit of backstory. All the free plugins I've been doing, one of the reasons, I guess, is to become more known for plugin development in the community. So when I start selling commercial plugins, I will be more trusted. And a part of that plan is to also actually try to do a SaaS that is targeted at craft. And this it is because I could do subscriptions, because that would be sustainable for me. So I'm I was thinking craft needs something more sustainable. I didn't know what that is, so I don't know. I think this sounds very interesting, and I trust Pixel Tonic and the research you have done. And I think it was a good point what you said, Brandon, about we have the luxury of actually seeing models that are proved and not pulling it out of your ass. That's yeah, but that's really so much better than figuring something out ourselves. And I don't know, how will you handle if you see the shift that this is starting to hurt the community, or and let's say us as plugin devs says this is hurting our business, or agencies says this is hurting our business. How will you handle that? Will you try to change course? Do you have any strategies to do that? I don't know what will happen.
Yeah,
we'll see.
We've got a 6-year history of changing course.
Exactly. Yeah.
People's needs. So hopefully, we've internalized some of that, and we'll apply that to the plugin store as well. We definitely are not claiming this is the one solution to rule them all, and everyone's problems are going to be solved by it. We think it's probably going to solve most, and it seems like the most. It seems like the best place to start. But we'll iterate from there.
Yeah, I'm definitely a big fan of actually iterating on shit you don't know, and none of us do know. And again, your history speaks for itself in one way, but even so, the whole world is changing, and things are moving towards subscription-based models, etc.
Yes, the whole world is changing faster than we can iterate.
This is getting highly philosophical over here.
Say again, Brad?
There's a very public history of us iterating on shit we don't know.
Yeah. Okay. So I think that's a good place to round it up. And thanks, Brad, for your wisdom.
Yeah. No,
it's good that you saved it for.
I'm gonna go ahead and wrap this up because I don't even listen to my wife this long. And, I love every single one of you jerks. No.
Thanks for your contribution.
Yeah.
All right. Let's wrap it up then.
Yeah.
If you guys have any final thoughts, glad to hear it, or we can just wrap it up and go get some food or something.
Yeah, I just want to
conversation on Slack. We'll pick it up there.
I just want to repeat, it was very nicely handled by you guys. I think people were freaking out, so I think it was good for everyone.
Like a therapy session.
Yes, indeed.
Much needed.
Well, cool.
All right.
Thanks everyone for showing up. This was 2.5 hours is not nothing. So we really appreciate it. We honestly think we have the best community in the world. That you guys would take 2.5 hours out of your day to talk over business models and stuff like that is amazing. So thank you so much. And
thank you guys.
Thank you so much for you guys to take the time to discuss things with us as well, and kind of put us at ease in some ways, because a lot of the times what we're able to communicate or absorb online just doesn't make, just doesn't show enough context, doesn't really kind of tell you about the people behind these products. And it was good to have you on to talk about this and put our minds at ease and get us to understand the bigger picture and the context. So thank you all for coming. Let's wrap it up and get ready for the next one. All right.
All right then.
Thanks a lot, Selvin.